So many of the things we use every single day, from the plastic in our phones to the fuel in our cars, they all come from petroleum. But what if we could make them from something greener, something that actually grows? Well, today we're going to dive into some truly brilliant chemistry behind making a high-performance engine oil from plants. So let's just jump right in, because this is the big question, right? This is what researchers have been wrestling with for years. On the surface, it sounds like an amazing idea. But as we're about to find out, there is a massive chemical hurdle that we have to get over first. Okay, to really get why this matters, we have to start with the oil we're all using right now. For more than 100 years, the lubricants that keep our engines from grinding to a halt have come from one place and one place only: crude oil. And yeah, that comes with some pretty serious baggage. And this slide really lays out the two sides of the story. Over on the left, you've got your standard petroleum-based oil. It's a fossil fuel, it's not renewable, and to make it work, you have to pack it with these not-so-great additives called SAPs. That's sulfated ash, phosphates, and sulfur. But on the right, you have biolubricants from vegetable oils. They're renewable, biodegradable, and they don't need any of those nasty SAPs. Seems like a total no-brainer, doesn't it? Well, not quite. It turns out every hero has a weakness, a kind of kryptonite. And for bio-oil, it is a big one. There is a single chemical reaction that has stopped these green lubricants from really taking over the market. Let's break down what's actually going on. The enemy has a name. It's called oxidation, and you've seen this happen a million times. It's the exact same process that makes an apple slice turn all brown and gross when you leave it out on the counter. When the molecules in vegetable oil get hit with the crazy heat and all the air inside an engine, they just start to break down and react in ways you really, really don't want them to. And this is what happens. This is the result. That oxidation causes the oil to thicken up and turn into this useless, goopy sludge. An engine trying to pump that stuff around is like you trying to drink a super thick milkshake through a tiny coffee stirrer. It's just not going to work. And eventually, it leads to catastrophic engine failure. So here's the bottom line. If you can't solve this oxidation problem, you just can't make a bio-oil that can survive inside an engine. It is the one challenge standing in the way of this whole green technology. Now, for decades, chemists have had a standard playbook for fighting oxidation. It's a pretty straightforward idea, but as we're about to see, it definitely has its limits. The old way is what we're calling the blend-in method. It's simple. You make your big batch of bio-oil, and then you just stir in a powdered antioxidant, in this case, a molecule called PNA. The analogy here is absolutely perfect. It's like adding sprinkles to frosting. Sure, they're mixed in, but they're really just sitting on the surface, offering a kind of shallow protection. But this is where our story takes a really interesting turn. A group of researchers looked at this old blend-in method and thought, come on, there's got to be a smarter way to do this. And that thinking led them to this absolute game-changing question. Instead of just mixing the protector with the oil, what if they could literally stitch it into the very fabric of the oil molecule? What if they could make the protection a fundamental part of the oil itself? So, this new build-in method is completely different. Instead of adding the antioxidant at the very end, they add it during a much earlier stage of production, and this allows it to form a permanent chemical bond with the oil molecules. It's not a topping anymore. It's baked right in, like chocolate chips and cookie dough. The protection becomes a totally inseparable part of the final product. And honestly, here is the most brilliant, most elegant part of the whole idea. How many new, complicated steps did this clever chemistry add to the whole manufacturing process? Zero. None. They simply changed when they added the ingredient. It is a perfect example of working smarter, not harder. Of course, a clever idea is only great if it actually, works. So the researchers set up a head-to-head competition, the old blend-in oil versus their new build-in oil. It was time for a showdown. To do this, they basically created an engine's worst nightmare right there in a beaker. They took both oil samples, cranked the heat up to a scorching 150 degrees Celsius, bubbled air through them, and even added metal catalyst to make them age faster. It was a race against time to see which oil could survive the punishment. And their measure for failure was pretty straightforward. How many hours would it take for the oil's viscosity, its thickness, to double? That's the point where it's officially turned into that thick, damaging sludge. So the longer an oil could last, the better it was. And the results on this chart, well, they speak for themselves. The bars show you how many hours each oil survived before it broke down. And that tall bar on the right, the new build-in method, it just completely blows the old method out of the water. It wasn't just a little bit better, it was a massive leap forward in stability.
So what this all means is that by chemically bonding the protector to the oil, the researchers created a molecule that was just intrinsically tougher, way more resilient. The theory worked. It was a huge success.
But hold on, because the story doesn't actually end there. This new, smarter molecule had one more surprise up its sleeve. It turned out that it wasn't just stronger all by itself, it was also a much better team player. Okay, so check out this U-shaped curve. On the far left and far right, you see how each antioxidant does on its own. But look what happens in the middle. When you start blending them together, the performance gets even better than either one could do individually. That's called synergy, where the team is way more powerful than the sum of its parts. They basically created a super blend. All right, so let's just quickly recap the big takeaways here. We started with bio-oils, a really promising green alternative that was being held back by one fatal flaw: oxidation. The old solution was to just blend in some protection, but the real breakthrough was to build that protection directly into the oil's molecules. And this totally elegant solution gives us a way better product, with zero extra manufacturing steps. And that really leaves us with a final thought. Because this isn't just a story about engine oil. It's a story about a whole new way of thinking, about building better solutions from the molecule up. And it really makes you wonder, what other materials that we use every single day are just sitting there, waiting for a similar flash of chemical genius to be completely reinvented?